we should perhaps get started
Hi.
then. Just to say to everybody in the chat, there is a link to the presentation slides that I've got for this workshop, and I have no concern if you wish to jump ahead and look at the slides that are still to come, or spend time in those rather than listen to me and Neil speaking. That's fine. This is your workshop. It's for you to do what you want to do with whatever you hear and see. And you can also comment on the slides if you want to. That'd be a really helpful thing. If you have something to add or something to complain about, just get in there, because this is meant to be a conference, not a, a kind of lecture, but there's always a danger it will turn into a lecture. And be rude to me and Neil if you feel that we should stop and answer a question or let you get on with things and stop talking altogether. That would be just delightful. We're very easygoing chaps, aren't we, Neil? So I ought to introduce my colleague on this presentation, which is Philippa Wilkes on the screen. But in real life, his name is Neil Butler. It's just that, like, when he dresses up, that's what he calls himself, I think. Is that right, Neil?
Yeah, during the summer, yes. When I'm on holidays.
And I think it's not too hard to work out that it's actually the name of his partner, and he's using her computer, but that's neither here nor there.
Yes,
so,
her office is set up during the summer, so I'm using her computer, and I didn't even see the name, so Richard pointed it out.
But everybody knows now that's Neil. And Neil and I share a big interest in TurtleStitch, in mathematics and in art. And so does Joek van Manfort, who unfortunately is, I say unfortunately only because I'm not there, is in French Catalonia at the moment, having, I think, a holiday. I hope he's having a holiday. And certainly he said he would try and join later, but couldn't join in this session as we'd hoped he could. So that's a good case of getting your priorities right, I think. And I'm going to now share the screen that I've got here. I think it's that one I want to share, yeah.
Yeah, so your project on the TurtleStitch.org. Yeah.
So can you see my slides now?
Yes. Yes.
Super. Because it doesn't show me my screen on the Zoom anymore. I just have to see my slides and hope for the best that you can see them. And you don't want to see that boring one. That was just really the thing from the, whoa, that's interesting. I forgot to animate your stuff, Neil. So we're going to start by us. That means me and Neil talking. I'm going to do too much talking as usual. I'm going to talk about controlled randomization, slightly out of control randomization, and then Neil's going to talk about structured noise. We then want you to explore anything you want, remix anything you want, and try it out, basically. And then finally, I hope we can come back at the end and share anything that you've found or any points for discussion or questions you want to raise with us. But in between, that number 4 item is really, me and Neil shut up and we listen to you, or we help you with any problems you have as you explore. It's a workshop. You're going to work, all right? Okay. So I'm going to start with my controlled randomization. And this is something I spoke about in the lightning talk. It's a graphic that I saw on Twitter one day without any attribution. And I said to myself, I bet you I could make an embroidery out of that. And got all full of myself as a pioneer in this kind of world, not realizing that actually this was a computer image based on a work done by Vera Molnár called Hommage à Dürer. I don't know how to pronounce that. Andrea will correct me, I'm sure.
Can I interrupt for just a second? We're not seeing the entire image that you're putting up, but we can't see all of the words. So if you intend for us to see all of the words, we cannot.
How disappointing. Let's try again. I put it down to Apple and their wonderful sidekick things. See, I'm showing the slides on my iPad, and that means that they are not necessarily being seen by you guys. So give me a second while I just reconfigure that and see if I can make sure it does reappear.
We see the slides, we just don't see the whole entire thing.
Yeah. So can you tell me whether you can see them all now? Hello?
No, just you.
You're not seeing the slides?
Just seeing you.
Share your screen.
Sorry, chaps. Let's just get this sorted out. Right, I need to share my screen again. That's why.
Yeah.
It's all very well playing around with screens, but you've got to share it as well.
Mhm.
Now, can you see all of that?
Yes.
Lovely. Awesome.
And if I present like that, can you still see all of it?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're winning now. Yeah, don't play with two screens. It's a waste of time. So here we are. This is the artwork created by Vera Molnár, born in 1924, I think, something like that, and still alive and kicking, and wonderful movies on the internet from her, which are well worth seeking out. But what she'd done here is before the age of computers, although that says 1989 there, her work, I'm not saying this particular work, but her work was about randomizing abstract artworks she used to throw dice, I believe, to choose which pin to take the thread to next in this pattern you see in front of you. Now, in fact, there are 5 by 5 cells, I call them, 5 across and 5 down. And within each cell, there are 4 pins. It's quite hard to work that out. You have to look closely. And what she does is she visits each pin within the cell only once at random, and then goes on to the next cell and the next cell after that. That's how this is constructed. It's very simple, isn't it? You can see why a simpleton like me says, I could program that. Surely it's going to be a straightforward job to do the random selection and so on. Well, it wasn't that easy, of course, and that's what is wonderful about these kinds of things, that they provoke the problem solving that I so much enjoy doing in programming. And they give me real challenges, but ones which I desperately want to finish, you know, and I don't give up on them because I'm keen to prove that I really can make that thing. And there it is on the left. That's the TurtleStitch project on the screen on the left. The red stitches are jump stitches. And then on the right is my actualization of that onto some green felt. It isn't as perfect, as beautiful in some ways, but it's got its own charm, I think. And no doubt I could improve that with time if I worked on it. So just to quickly show you that TurtleStitch project's code. Now, I like in the lightning talk, there's no way we're going to go through every part of this, but there are some important things in here. One of them is about things like scale. You can see I've got a variable called scale, set scale to 40, it says. And if I didn't have that, and I didn't use that variable throughout for every move that I make in TurtleStitch, I wouldn't be able to make the whole thing bigger and smaller to fit the embroidery frames that I've got. So I highly recommend these kinds of practices to you if you're going to get into doing this kind of stuff. But of course, it's a kind of mathematics confidence I have. And that's why the mathematics word turns up here. Even a simple thing like scaling is feasible just by applying a variable throughout to every move. Yeah. And I have that confidence that that's going to happen. That's going to work. And I recommend it to you. Then the other thing is the use of lists to decide which points am I going to visit with the thread in the way the picture, you saw that, you remember the picture. And there are 2 kinds of tours, I've called them. There are the points to tour within each cell. That's the first repeat loop you can see there. And I decided to do that just by filling the list with 1 to 16, because there are 16 of these points to visit. And then the second thing to do is to shuffle that, which I'll come to in the next slide. But the other tour I've got to do is around the 5 by 5 grid of cells, you know, the whole thing, as it were. And I want to do that by going across the bottom, up 1, across to the left, up 1, across to the right, so that each time I'm only moving from one cell to another cell, not darting right across the whole diagram. That would then have jump stitches, which were silly, in my opinion. You might think it would be quite interesting, actually. I don't know. Somebody can remix it to do that if you want. Then this shuffle business is important. This is the randomization of the title of this workshop. Here, it's a very controlled kind of randomization. All I'm doing is taking this 16 element list and shuffling. I'm swapping pieces within it, you know. So you imagine you have a deck of cards. I'm taking one card out and then I'm swapping it with another card. And I do that half the length of the list's time, thinking that might be good enough. And I'm in a kind of Facebook discussion with Jens at the moment, although he hasn't answered yet, about whether that's good enough or not. In other words, does it randomly select well enough? And what does well enough mean anyway? Well, my simple answer to that question is it looks okay to me as an artwork. And that's a really important thing in Vera Molnár's work. She would use randomization frequently to generate different images, and then having done that, pick from them the ones she thought looked best. And just ignore all the rest, just throw them out. And I think that that was a good insight for me to realize I don't have to care about the mathematical definition of randomness. I just have to care about, does this look nice? And then finally, this is a very, I'm not going to stay on this slide for more than a second or two, but this is just the bit that does the actual moving of the thread, going to each point within the cell, and then going from each cell to each cell. So you can see, you can go and look at that at your leisure in your time. I want to go on to very quickly this second one. This one was very exciting for me, much more exciting than the Vera Molnár one. And this is slightly out of control randomization, as you'll see when I get to it. Basically, here are some steps to make an artwork, yeah? You can all read that, can you?
Yes.
Excellent. And you draw these 3 ziggy-zaggy lines, okay? But as you go down the page, they become less sharp and less vertical to indicate different kinds of mountain or hill ranges, okay? And then what you do is you extend all these lines. I don't extend them all in this slide because it'll take too long, but here some of them are extended using a ruler on paper, yeah? And then finally, you fill in the sections that are being created. At the top, you fill it in with the colors of the sky. In the next layer, you make it the colors of the mountains, and then the hills, and finally the green fields. And what you might end up with is something like this. Well, not on the computer, this is on paper. And this is something I did when I was a child at school. I was told by the teacher that algorithm of steps, and I followed it. And then in 2017, I suddenly realized as I got excited about Vera Molnár, I know what this is about. I was taught this at school, and I'd completely forgotten it until I came back to this. Why did I come back to it? Because my mum gave me the picture back that she'd been carefully looking after for me. So what a delightful coincidence that was, and a wonderful moment. Now, I'm going to quickly go and show you one of these versions. I think I'll show you the TurtleStitch version, but you can click on these yourself if you go to the slides. Can you still see that?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to open the project. God knows if I'll ever get back to the slides again. Who cares? All right, so it takes a moment to open, but here it is. And don't worry about the code this time. I'm going to shift click on the green flag because that makes it go super fast, and run it, yeah? Okay, so here are my 3 ziggy-zaggy lines and all the extended lines. And I can just click again. I want you all to shout out at me when you find one you like. I think I saw Beth raise her hand. I said shout, lads, shout.
Okay, that one I love.
What, this one now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm illustrating to you that the same thing that Vera Molnár would do. She would just generate patterns with code, and then she would discard some of them. She'd say, well, I don't really like that one. That's kind of lost the peak off the paper, and I don't really think it's a well-balanced kind of thing. So she'd use her aesthetic human judgment to try and decide, is this going to be worth now taking and making into an embroidery or making into a painting or whatever, okay? So this randomization is slightly out of control in the sense that I haven't guaranteed that it's going to stay on the paper. I haven't guaranteed that it's going to be aesthetically pleasing. I've simply made it work and then started choosing amongst them. There's one I like, you know, okay? So as I said, God help me if I can get back to the slides. Can I get back to, oh yes, I can, that's brilliant. Okay, can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay, so I now hand over to Neil to say stuff about his work.
So I suppose I will talk quickly because I'd rather have a conversation rather than me ranting at you. But I suppose I start when I got the machine from Richard in just March last year. He I suppose I took it for a week or two, and then suddenly we were in lockdown, so I had it for quite a while longer than that. I was looking for an idea of how to understand how to use it. And on Plotter Twitter, there's a Twitter thing of people use pen plotters. I saw somebody who did concentric circles in an array with some randomized, either choosing to draw it or to not draw it. And I thought like it would be a way for me to learn how to figure out what was needed to do, or how to make TurtleStitch work. Because I kind of had the idea that the code would be okay, but then the reality of actually stitching it would be an entirely different thing. So if you want to move on, Richard. And so the first bit of the code is just choosing the center of a set of polygons. Then it's drawing the polygons one after another. And the only randomness is either, it's a binary choice, it's either draw or don't draw that polygon at that instant, and then move to the next size up or size down. I can't remember how the thing is coded.
I think you said go to the next slide there, Neil.
Oh yeah, the next slide is good because actually people see what it is. So what this was, the structure is the simple array of the 8x8 array of polygons, and it was draw. I think there's 8 layers in each one, and then it was just a coin toss of whether to draw one or not draw one. And so it's very controlled. There's an awful lot of, it's 8x8, it's a box. There's no variation in this around what size things to draw or the types of things to draw. But every time you generate, you press go again, you get an entirely different pattern because it's a coin toss about whether or not you draw something. If you go on to the next one, and then when you stitch it, this is one of my first stitching attempts. So there's lots of jump stitches, which I didn't know how to handle at the time. But you can see, with Richard's rainbow thread, it actually works really well. Again, I think it's a bit too small, but that's, these are the things you learn. You learn so much when you're actually having to use the machine. Because the code is well and good. I did explode one of Richard's needles. I could have too many stitches at one instance, but the code lets you do that, but the machine is very unhappy with that. And then once I figured that out, then you can see what else can you do to be more, like what else can you let be free or let change? Because with everything, with code there, you can just tick a box and suddenly something else can be different or something else can change and be free. And it's very little effort once you've coded the thing initially. Do you want to move on to the next slide? And so here I just set the initial angle of the polygon to gradually change over time with the exact same code otherwise. Again, so the only randomness is that 0 or 1 draw or not draw, even though it looks very random. I think it's that, what Richard said, that artistic idea of, does that look random enough to me? And I think it does, even though there's just a slow progression of what the change is. And move on again. And then this was, again, the only thing that's random is draw or not draw, and the rest is changing the center of the polygons as they move. I suppose my first experience of doing something like using Scratch or Snap or block-based code to make things was doing Scratch for Second Life with Karina Gervin. And there was the thing there where we were trying to figure out how to draw a spiral staircase. So it was doing Scratch in 3D. And if you could figure out the spiral staircase, you could pretty much do anything because you had such good control of it. And at this, I think, if you can make a series of concentric polygons or just a polygon, write code so you can choose how many sides and it'll always have the same radius. I think it's a really good way to gain a huge insight into how this works by being able to do that. And I do base a lot of my stuff on just polygons because I'm comfy with them. And I think there's one more image. And then this again, this is just changing the sides and then changing how the things progress. But the only randomness is the draw or not draw, which I was actually surprised at. I thought I put more randomness into the code when I was doing it, but looking at it, I know there is randomness, but I couldn't find the pick random anywhere in it until it was down at the very bottom. But you see, you can do an awful lot with a small amount of random. Now you could easily have a random thing and say the radius of each thing you draw either to be pick a random radius in a small range for each one to generate an entirely different image each time with things overlapping and going completely mental every time. But again, it's structuring it just enough so that it is aesthetically pleasing and the chaos is there, but it's also, the structure is also visible, I think. And I think that's it. Is there one more?
No,
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Neil, for being so brief about things. I just wanted to say to everybody, now it's your turn. And it's really just open to you now to go and look at some of these things if you wish. You can go and find something completely different if you like. I want to particularly draw attention to Yuk's inspiration, because Yuk wanted to be in this workshop but can't be. So he can't tell you about what he's done, but you can go and have a look at these pictures and say to yourself, like me, I think I could do that in TurtleStitch and give it a go. Because that's exactly what happened to Yuk as well, but with this interesting stuff by Spakovsky, I think his name is. And then, of course, I've kept my link into Joachim Wedekin's digital art page, because there's plenty of good stuff there, which he has already done, which you can remix as well, I guess, in Snap mostly rather than TurtleStitch, but you choose. And so at this point, I'm going to shut up and let you take over. And Neil and I are still here. And if you want to ask us questions, either in the chat or by shouting out, we're here for you. And when we get to about 10 minutes from the end, I'll stop and ask you, have you got anything to show us? And expect homework from everybody.
I've put a link to my profile page in the chat there, and I think you can get my projects there if you wanted to have a look at them and try and play around.
Neil, on this slide, if they open the slides, that TurtleStitch project against your name is that link. Yeah.
Oh, real cool. Thank you.
Yeah, but you're right. That you've got it in the chat. That's good too. So it's now what, 4:25? I reckon you've got a good 20 minutes at least to get stuck in and see if you can make something. And if you, as I say, if you want help, we're here. And there are some other good TurtleStitchers around in here as well who can help if you get stuck. So I can go make a cup of tea now, can I?
Don't go too far.
Do you want me to leave that screen shared, or are you happy to go and find it yourself?
Well, we're going to have to find it ourselves because the link isn't live on the screen share. The link we have to open. We have to open the thing to get it.
But you can see that Jen is being kind and posting in some of the links from it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. I'll leave Jen to finish that job rather than intervene, I think. Lazy or what?
What?
Brilliant. So in the chat, Jen has put the links that you can see up there on this slide. Okay.
Terrible.
Thank you very much, Jen.
No.
Everybody needs a glamorous assistant. Why haven't I got one? No disrespect, Neil.
Okay, no, I'm not one for glamour.
That's what you say.
Pen up.
I suppose there's one more project actually I'll just put in the chat, which is completely different, but it's entirely random.
Thanks, Neil.
It is a exponential curve.
I forgot to say, if you know what you can do, you can remix any of these projects. And of course, the nice thing about that is you're kind of building a chain of change and ideas. Don't be afraid to do that just because you're scared you're not going to be able to do anything good. You just have to change one number and suddenly you'll have something different and better.
It was inspired by this post I saw. I have no idea where it was. Using a date to generate a pattern in Python, and then I realized I could turn it into TurtleStitch and generate, with randomness, generate a new, an infinite variety of awesome looking things.
So Neil, did you find that they had Python code there?
Yeah, he has code for this for the thing in the blog, which I took and stole and then remixed in Python, and then so it was a weird one learning. I learned it in Python to then bring it back into block based, so that I could really work with it.
So I found that a really fruitful way forward. I'm a very lazy man, and I love going and finding other people's solutions in Python or some other processing, that kind of stuff. Even though I don't enjoy those programming languages very much, I much prefer the jigsaw programming. I can read them well enough to see what the algorithm is and bring it back into a Snap or a Scratch or a TurtleStitch environment. And I think I highly recommend that kind of way of working, especially if you're scared. Oh, I'm not sure I could ever do anything great. You can at least live off, as I do, live off the back of the greats by going and stealing their code and and of course you're doing everybody a favor, because there are people that will be able to work with the TurtleStitch, but who wouldn't make any sense of the Python and would struggle, is my opinion anyway.
Yeah, so my first bit of code, the thing that I really learned coding was using GeoGebra, just a off-the-shelf maths software, and using that to create animations and complex shapes. But through using that, I was then able to know what I needed to do for TurtleStitch, or for processing. But it's the workflow really depends on what it is you're doing. Often I start with pen and paper. Actually, now I'm back to actually drawing it and then seeing what do I need to tell TurtleStitch to do through,
Yeah, and I'm not how can I put this, overly concerned about the teaching of computing through TurtleStitch. But I know that's a concern for many, that actually there's a purpose for working with TurtleStitch or Snap, which is to teach computing. So I would say that this idea that you go and find code in another language and translate it into Snap or Scratch or TurtleStitch is certainly, I think, a really valuable, how can I call it, cementer of computing ideas, It's a challenging thing to do, but it can be ever so fruitful, it seems to me, from a learning perspective.
Yeah, that's what I started teaching maths, but I've learned trigonometry so much. I've learned more about trigonometry through TurtleStitch and GeoGebra than I knew going into teaching after many years in college. So it does cement so many really important concepts. Because it's so. That's what it's an immediate thing. You learn to play it like you play an instrument, I guess. Margaret, I've definitely, the processing in P5.js and the generative arting is, I think TurtleStitch is ideally made for that, because you're creating a generative art piece in a very, what feels like an ungenerative medium. So I think it has a huge power in there. Stitching doesn't feel like something that could be computer generated, or or from those things. I think that dissonance is really powerful in when things are created. And the inspiration from those communities is great. Bob, I've downloaded the image, but it has disappeared from one of the desktops. I agree with Richard, don't try 2 screens, is too many. Oh, there we go. Oh, they're cool.
Richard,
Hi.
can I ask a question on Vera, on the Vera Molnár code?
Yeah, please do.
It's one of the, you might know it in your head, but one of the variables, cell to draw. Cell to draw.
Can I get it up in front of me and show it to people at the same time?
Sure, please. It's just I'm trying to teach myself what each variable is doing first. Trying to visualize. I can't figure that one.
And you think I might know?
Of course I would. It just has a number 30 against it, and I'm trying to get the.
Right. So let me just get it open. And then
Okay, so I go back to Zoom and see what you're.
Well, if you like. I mean, you could have perhaps shared yours, but it doesn't matter. I'm doing it now. So here we are. Can you all see that? Those that want to?
It's opening, yeah. And it's in the variables. Excuse me.
Now, when you say in the variables.
So I pulled up the variables palette on the left.
Yeah, and there's all those.
The bottom one, cell to draw.
Yeah.
So when I clicked on that, I could see the number 30. I was kind of checking on all the variables, and I could see what all the others probably mean, but the 30.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to this code here called initialise. Can you see it?
Yes.
I'm just going to edit that so I can show it to you. And I'm looking to see, did I write down anything about cell to draw? Because I try to comment especially in an initializing, to sort of set out my stall. And I do this not because I'm, somehow saintly and good practice and that nonsense. I do it because I'm an old man and I can't remember my own code.
No, but this is good practice as well. And if I had thought of it, I could have done. Let me Google that for you and got in to see it.
At the moment, I can't see cell to draw initialized in there. Okay, so that means it's not some kind of universal global kind of thing that I'm going to use. It must be a working variable. Probably, I'm going to close that and now go to the draw cell thing, yeah? Which I see has got cell to draw there. Oh, look, set cell to draw to item cell of cells to tour. Now, I hope those names are meaningful enough, but if they're not, I'll tell you what they are, yeah? So if I click on cells to tour there, cells to tour is the list of 1 to 16 that's been shuffled, okay? As I recall it, that is. In fact, if we go and click on it over here, we can see, can't we?
Yes.
There we are. There it is. They're not been shuffled yet. Oh no, I'm wrong. It's not. It's
the which of the 36. Yeah.
It's the whole bigger picture. That's correct. Yeah. So cells to tour is the list of 36. You're right. I'm a bit confused that it ends in 30. Oh, that's because this is this interesting thing about touring round them. Yeah. You start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's working across the bottom. Then you jump up to 11 and go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, going across the second row. All right. So they've been organized. All right. So that's what cells to tour is.
Yes.
And so cell to draw is item cell of cells to tour. So it's saying which one of the cells to tour should I be drawing next? Okay. So when it says, that's as clear as mud, isn't it?
No, it's just the 30 is throwing me off because I can see the relation. All the others are factors, or they fit the 6 by 6 and 4 by 4. Why there's only 30 cells to draw? Maybe.
No, it's not a total. It is the number of the cell to draw. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's the number that's plucked out of a shuffled deck of cards called cells to draw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not shuffled. Yeah. They're arranged. They're not shuffled. It's the other when you come to draw the cell within the cell that you actually do.
Yes. Okay. That's. Thank you.
I still feel like I've waded through mud there, but I think I know what the answer is now.
Okay. That's better.
Give me a bit more preparation time. I'll give you a better explanation than that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. Because I know I've played with this one before, and gingerly changed everything, but that one didn't. I couldn't figure that one.
I would say change things, unless you're trying to muck it about and make a different thing. Then the best place is to go to the initialize procedure, the one I'm showing now. And then you can change the pattern size, so you can make it 3 by 3.
I think that's, yeah, I think that's what I've done before and made it down to 4 instead of 6 by 6.
Or you can change the cell size. I was following Molnár here with her 4 by 4 cells. Or you can change the scale because it's not fitting the embroidery frame to be bigger or smaller to fit better.
I know why I played with it before was to see, you know, could I bring it down to a small enough set of numbers that didn't spoil the beauty of it, but that would be easier for a child to copy with the needles and the thread and the nails, to do a nail art.
So let me change pattern size, which is the
6
overall
by 6.
thing.
Yeah.
Change that to 3, shall I? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And apply that. Sorry, okay that. And then let's go and see what happens when I try running it. I'll have to zoom to fit. There we are. That's all it does, yeah?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
And of course, if you were doing it with children, you'd have the fun of banging in the 16 nails or pins for each square into some timber or some other thing.
Yeah, or cork. Yes, pegboard. I was thinking of. Yeah, it's lovely.
You might be able to get pegboard with the holes already there, could you? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, you can buy a. You can remember Max showed us. You can you can buy a kind of a ready-made grid.
Yeah.
And then pull out in between the squares. Yeah.
It'd be ever so powerful to do this before going anywhere near the scratch or snap, so that they get a very solid body syntonic knowledge of what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that when they come to look at the code or try and write the code on their own part, they've got that kind of relationship with the real thing that they've experienced.
I think that would be a
vague abstract idea. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be real homage to Vera Molnár as well. Actually.
And to see more puppet.
Yeah. Yeah.
All in one. It'd be very good. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just going to add, you could use pegboard and golf tees to make your, and then you can reconfigure them.
Yep, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And Susan's asking about examples of processing and TurtleStitch code side by side. I certainly don't have personally. When I do this process of going from somebody else's code to my own, I very rarely keep the original. And I sometimes adapt and change anyway. But it would be a very interesting thing to do, to produce a few examples of that. And
actually, I have an example actually.
Well, let me finish Neil and say, and more importantly, show some explanation of why did you change it to this? Why did you what are the equivalences, and give a guide to that process would be very, very good indeed. Sorry, Neil, go ahead.
No, I just realized that I have done the Lorenzo tractor I've done in this. I stole from a processing website, so I'll open this. And I even have this one, some of it annotated as well. So I'll paste that in here.
So Neil, do you want to share the screen? I'll get off sharing.
It might be easier just to put the link on it.
Oh, you want me to look at a link? Yeah.
I've put a link to the project in the chat there.
Okay.
I have to find the Lorenzo tractor code, which is so. It was an old processing website, so I might not be able to find it. But, oh yeah, something like this. Yeah.
Is this the one?
That's the wrong link. I ignored that last one I put in. This no, that's there should be a new link, or did that not? No, it didn't actually copy the link over. Sorry.
You want me to go to that processing link that you've got there?
No, actually, both of those are wrong because the TurtleStitch didn't change the. Didn't change didn't copy the URL in. I'll just get it now. That's a tractor.
So I shouldn't look at any of these.
Well, you could, but they'd be useless and confusing. So
Right, I've gone back to me 3x3 for a minute.
yeah, actually, I think that look at the cell size of 3. Actually, the less complicated ones actually look getting more affecting in those. There's the Lorenzo tractor. That's correct.
Shall I open the project?
Yes, please.
What would you like me to do?
So basically, I set this up in the way that I let's see. Oh, here we go. In the way from the processing.org code I found.
Yeah.
Just need to. And the code is actually, I'm going to paste code here. And you can see in the processing code. Now again, you can then introduce randomness to this once you have the thing working and have it the way have it as effective as you want it to be. Then you can use randomness to generate the initial position of these things. So you basically set an initial position somewhere to start. Then you set the various variables here, which I think in TurtleStitch it's not as obvious, nearly as obvious as what the code is doing. It's much harder to see it from this. Whereas if you were to look at the processing code, you can see how things are changing very easily, which I think is very interesting idea. That
you're making a very strong assertion there, Neil.
Well, I find that. Yeah.
You're saying that you think it's easier to read processing than it is to read TurtleStitch?
I think for this one it is, because the processing code is so small.
Okay.
Whereas this, you have to do an awful lot of setup in this.
Yes, yes.
Whereas if you open the processing link there.
Oh yeah, sorry.
It's in the second. There's only about 6 lines of code really, and then a loop. So if you go to see the 3 little graphics at the top of the screen, the one with the text at the top middle, sorry. See, there's a reload thing just beside that with that one there. Yeah. Right would have been the right word. So you set that. See the setup here. The floats is the initialization of everything, which is much bigger in TurtleStitch. It's easier, I think, to do in TurtleStitch, but it's harder to.
So I'm going to rephrase what you said earlier cheekily. I'm going to say processing lets you make very compact, repetitive, simple initialization calculations, for example, or setting of variables in a way that jigsaw languages tend to spell out as great big lumps of sequential code. Is that right?
Yeah. but it's much easier to do the great big lumps when you're learning than it is to assume that, you know, doing a lot with a few keystrokes is intimidating. I'm not there yet. But if you scroll down a little, you see the entire code is just that dx, dy, dz bit. That's the loop that tells tells processing where to go next in 3-dimensional space, and then just add that amount onto where it was, and then repeat.
Yeah.
And so then to replicate that in TurtleStitch is I suppose it's easy, but it's harder to read. It'd be easier to understand this, I find, if you're trying to learn it.
So I can't see where the repetition is.
Well, it's in the 4 loop down lower, I think.
So I teach my students. So we started with snap and Space Invaders. And they found the block-based coding easier. And then we initially did processing and then went to p5.js because they're doing digital media. So they preferred the JavaScript syntax than the Java syntax. And that is just because they're not coders. These are students doing digital media. So they didn't really have much coding prior to coming to university. So when you showed them stuff like this, they hated it, just so you know. So,
maybe just
and they couldn't, they actually found the block-based, and especially the snap versus, because obviously we didn't have access to a kind of embroidery machine. Well, we did, but we're not allowed to use it. So, you know, it's there, I can see it, I just can't use it. So they preferred kind of building games and simulations than the embroidery. But they would have liked this just as much as the sort of Space Invaders. But they didn't find the jump too hard from doing snap to then doing, but you did have to contextualize it, and we had to go right back to the beginning and reteach what a variable was and reteach kind of like anything. So they couldn't actually transfer the knowledge that they'd learned, even though I'd taught it kind of independent from the programming language. So I still think there's like a fear, and especially when you see like Java and they did this sort of, you're dealing with, you've also got to bear in mind, students' language abilities and, first language abilities, let alone kind of their coding stuff. So I found that it was doing a really complex project like Space Invaders and just telling them it's not that hard because they know how to play it, allowed them to kind of feel like they'd achieved, oh, I like that one. Sorry, so that was like just my experience, and these are first year undergrads. I find it slightly different with younger age groups, but specifically the ones that are sort of first year undergrads coming through, they are really kind of found it difficult, that context switch and actually transferring knowledge out of the silo. It's a very interesting one. So we do full stack, just JavaScript. So we do hardware and everything with JavaScript now, or anything that looks JavaScript like, should I say? Yeah. So yeah, so I find it easier for the students to do it like that, and a less of a headache for me, if I'm being honest. But I do like the TurtleStitch, and hopefully they'll let us use the embroidery machine at university next year. They've got two. They've got two embroidery machines, and because we're in a different faculty or school, we're not allowed to use them, and they don't really use them. It's like, sorry, I shouldn't say this, but yeah, it's just a little frustrating. Edit this bit out, please.
So thanks, Jen. We're 10 minutes to the hour. I think, is that right? We finish on the hour? Does anybody want to show?
Yes, we finished on the hour.
Sorry?
Yes, we finished on the hour.
Yeah. So does anybody have anything they want to show, or any more questions to ask before we close off? Have you done your homework is what I'm asking.
Well, I don't have anything to share because I should have taken a screenshot, but I started with Neil's, and I played around with changing numbers, which was a lot of fun. Changed the basic polygon to a square. But I likened it to, this week I have my young nephew here, and we anatomically took apart a bear. So trying not to break any of the wires or seams, and I was being very careful with this Neil's code, trying to just change things but not break it, and of course I did end up breaking it. And so then I thought, no problem, because you can go back to the original. We couldn't do that with the bear. Once you broke it, so then I tried Richard's, and I had a hard time just changing the numbers, and then I lost the whole thing. So it only means I'm going back to play some more.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, Beth, because I didn't design any of this for people to tinker with. You remember, I put the comments there to help me remember what I had written, because I find it harder and harder to keep track of anything complicated like that. So I I wonder whether if I had a pedagogic mind, I would have designed it differently. And I know that John Hegarty, I don't know if you're there still, John. You've often done that with worksheets, haven't you, John? You've given people some basic code and you said, and here are the variables that are worth changing. And this is the range of numbers that might be worth exploring even, so that you've given them something really fruitful to do in advance of later on being a bit more confident to do something a bit more ambitious, perhaps.
Yeah, it was that. It was a case of give them something that they can get started on, get something on the screen that looks okay, and then from there, it gives them the confidence then to take the next step.
Yeah, and you specifically gave them the variables that are worth changing, didn't you? And the range of numbers that might be interesting.
Yeah, just suggestions. I'd say change these things, it'll do this. Change these things, it'll do this. Over to you. Change whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the encouragement is best to say break whatever you want. You can just reload it, but you have to learn how far. You can only learn how far things can be pushed if you break them. Yeah. Otherwise,
I didn't try anything very exotic. I wanted to. I've been thinking about embroidery and like its traditions, and so I just took Neil's and I also changed it to a square, and I used this. I played around with the different built-in embroidery stitches. So that's, to me, the zigzags, cross stitch is a little too complicated for this one, but because I didn't expand it. But to me, this looks like kind of more American, like sampler work. The aesthetic changes a lot when you make those little changes. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I think you can see it's shared, right? Is that shared? Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
It does. Yes, it looks like what I think of as an American blanket.
Yeah, it looks like an American blanket, and so I'm not saying I like that. I'm just saying I'm trying to do some work this summer and then with the undergraduates when they show up in the fall to really more cover the surface of fabric. And I'm not really sure. I hope that ends up with some cool suggestions for TurtleStitch of what kinds of things that, besides these linear stitches, what kinds of filling in and big block stuff will be a good compromise between program it yourself and do what the machine can do.
Yeah.
And so I was experimenting with the ones that Andrea and Michael have already allowed in TurtleStitch here. See what their aesthetic is. Yep.
I really like it. Pity you've put it away, because Simon's complaining about the jump lines, and what he means is the red stitches on your screen that cut right across from one side to another. And I wanted to say to Simon, that was why when I did my Molnár embroidery, I decided I'm going to go round in sequence in a kind of snaky pattern, so I only ever jump from one to another, rather than.
Yes, I have studied your project. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the jump lines, Simon, are a psychological jump. Sorry for making it funny, that we have to make ourselves. We have to remember we are going to cut them away. So
yeah.
They can jar unnecessarily when we're designing.
Mags, you're not wrong, but the truth is, Vera Molnár did her thing with just one long thread. She tied it in one place apparently.
Yeah, and I remixed.
In some cases, you don't need to cut the jump lines. Just leave them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what to do with the jump lines, say in Vera Molnár's, if it was a physical thing. So.
Yeah.
That's my job for the next while.
They stayed in, is what I'm trying to tell you. They were part of.
Yeah.
Margot, you've
it's lovely.
Something.
And actually, Margaret, would it be possible to stitch it? Stitching one of these things was one I broke one of the needles on Richard's machines, because in the swirly thing, the density gets really high in the centers. So there's a bit of code needed in it to, the plan was before I gave back the machine was to can't keep track of the last 10 stitches, and if they were all within a certain radius of each other, then don't do those, to save them before you stitch them, and then skip on to the 11th stitch or something. Some way to avoid an overdance thing, which would cost me money. So if you're going to stitch something like that, a bit more code has to come in for the real world stuff. Like I've done, again, it's not learning the real world thing, which I think the TurtleStitch has this unique power. But I think on the machine, Richard, if I could be wrong, you have a jump stitch area, but if the thing goes out, the machine automatically just moves your design into the stitch area.
Well, it will warn you when you're planning anyway, Neil. I think 13 seems to be the tolerance.
Yeah, my understanding is if the instructions you put into the embroidery machine would take it out of the area, then it won't stitch it at all. I mean, it just won't do it. Okay. And you have to make sure that the file you send it is actually within bounds, one way or another. Yeah. Well, thanks, Mags. You've still got a minute in which to show any homework, anybody?
Oh God, I lost it. I think I shut it.
What, your homework, you mean?
Yeah, because I was looking at Margot's spirals and trying to see could I count, but I can't.
I mean, Margot, those spirals, I think, come from Polyspy. Is that correct?
They come from Neil's project. It's called Cumulative Sum Curve, and I made a remix only. But then it's out of the embroidery area, so there's no way to get it stitched, right?
And that's what I call out of control, not randomization quite, but how do you keep things in control is so hard. But,
yeah, that's a pity because it looks so nice and you cannot recreate it, I think.
My suggestion to you is to consider doing the scaling thing I've spoken about, which is to multiply every move by a scale variable, which you can change without changing anything else. Initialization, and then shrink it and expand it to fit. So you might find that's dealing with that.
It's one of the powers and drawbacks of using pure randomness is that you might get something really pretty that just doesn't work, and you've no control over it, and you just have to come back and do it again, or keep trying and to get one that will fit inside where you want it to.
So, I'm sorry to cut you off there, Neil, but just to say it's gone past 5 now. You're welcome to stay here and chat for as long as they let us, but I don't know how long that'll be. But I hope we'll meet some of you tomorrow in the Birds of a Feather session, which is to represent the growing community of TurtleStitch fans, of which I'm one, as you can tell. And please join Andrea in a few minutes for her keynote as well, which is going to be about our TurtleStitch world. Is that right, Andrea?
Absolutely.
So, and I think
I admit I pre-recorded it. I just got dropped out of the meeting, as you saw, and sometimes my load is so high on my computer. I think I would have run into problems.
Okay.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing you.